Previously on Crime Adjacent. This is a long one, folks, but it all ends tonight, right here, right now. So where were we? On the night of Saturday, December 16th, 2023, Ridgewood police had everything they needed to arrest Daniel Palmer, not just for the kidnapping and assault of B. Macy, who had been discovered in his parking lot that night, but for all of the murders linked to the rest stop killer. They caught him red-handed, almost literally. For one thing, B was discovered in his parking lot, just under the window of his headquarters downtown. There was a bloody trail leading from B's assault site to the headquarters building. But then, for the kicker, during a struggle in Daniel Palmer's office, a cache of buttons came crashing out of his beloved flag pin collection. These buttons had been secreted away, just as FBI profilers had said they would be. From a forensic psychology point of view, it made so much sense. The flag pins were the public stand-ins for the buttons, according to Chief Williams. Palmer couldn't wear the buttons around. After all, he'd be caught straight away. But if he hid his special souvenirs behind his flag pins, he could wear the flag pins wherever he wanted, like an inside joke only he knew about. It was an act of insidious transference, his way of turning private souvenirs into public trophies and more or less flaunting his power in much the same way serial killers give victims jewelry to family members to wear around, to remind them. But it wasn't the truth. It made sense, psychologically. It's probably exactly what a profiler would say. But it wasn't what was really happening. Because I was there. I saw Daniel Palmer's face when his flag pin case fell to the ground and all those buttons came crashing out. I mean, I couldn't prove this in a court of law, but from what I know of people and how to read them, this much was clear. Daniel Palmer had no idea what those buttons meant. Not a clue. It was evident. While Chief Williams and Detective Jones glommed onto the significance of the buttons right away, Daniel Jr. was just as confused as Daniel Sr., his father, as well as a few other of the lower-rung cops on scene who had never been filled in. But there was more. The thinnest of clues. If the right vortex of air had not struck at that exact moment, I might have missed it. The hair. The thing that finally tied all the pieces together. Just floating there, drifting slowly downward in the space between Chief Williams and Daniel Palmer Sr. That's when I knew. The killer wasn't Daniel Palmer Jr. or Sr. or even the Chief. The killer was at the hospital, probably about to finish off B. Macy and Margie Miller, the last witnesses. Sure, both were on life support and about to die anyway, but why leave it to risk? Why leave any witnesses behind to one of the most remarkable frame jobs in the history of true crime? Here's the story. But first, a special thanks to all who have made it to this, the end of the season. I'm so happy you're here, truly, and I have great news. You don't have to wait for the next season. It's coming next Wednesday. We don't call this the never-ending true crime story for nothing. Each season simply rolls into the next, and you do not want to miss the next season. It's weird, creepy, insane. I promise that it will tickle all of your true crime taste buds and leave you up at night, staring at the ceiling and wondering, is someone inside my bedroom at the foot of the bed? So that's nice. You can find the trailer on podcasts everywhere or on our Patreon page, patreon.com/crimeadjacent, where you can also find information about the first True Crime College on December 3rd. See you next week. From San Francisco, this is Crime Adjacent, the never-ending true crime story told weekly. I'm Chase Patrick. Police caught Ted Bundy for the final time in 1979 because he couldn't resist stealing another car. Yes, another Volkswagen Beetle. They caught the son of Sam from parking tickets. They caught Dennis Nielsen, the Scottish serial murderer, because he tried to flush body parts down the toilet and blocked up the entire apartment building. Plumbers arrived and, well, you can guess how it went from there. The guy who killed the Idaho college students left his knife sheath and DNA behind at the scene, only to circle around the house the next day and in days to come. Morons. All of them. These guys are not the secret geniuses they're made out to be in the public imaginary. Nearly to a person, they're narcissistic idiots who think they're smarter and wiser than everyone else. Uncatchable geniuses, only to fall victim to their own delusions of grandeur. But by far, my favorite take on this theme of abject imbecility comes from the Wichita serial killer who named himself BTK for bind, torture, kill. For years, the BTK Killer struck with impunity. He started in 1974 and officially ended in 1991, killing 10 people along the way. I love the story of how he engineered his own capture. It's probably my favorite story in all of true crime, a testament to the sheer stupidity and gullibility of these men who, for some reason, become culturally glorified as brilliant masterminds instead of what they really are: lucky, dumb, violent men. Like the Zodiac and the Son of Sam and Jack the Ripper, the BTK wrote letters to the cops and the media, taunting them, bragging. He sent in crime scene photos and even trophies, which he took from his victims, IDs, jewelry, that type of thing. And for years, for decades really, it worked. He had done it. He had been, in the macabre calculation of serial killers, successful. He had gone uncaptured for literally decades, terrorizing communities along the way. The thing is, he'd probably still be unknown and anonymous to this very day. But then, I still can't believe it. The Wichita newspaper, the Eagle, which had been following this case from the very beginning in the 1970s, just like Winnie in her Ridgewood recorder, reported later, after he was caught, that the BTK talked with a psychologist about why he suddenly resurfaced in 2004. Remember, he had not murdered since 1991. No letters to cops or the media. He had remained completely free and anonymous. But in 2004, he got bored, jealous even. The killer later told that psychologist that he had seen a newspaper story about the 30th anniversary of the first murders, the Otero family, in 1974, and he thought, why not? Author Robert Beatty was writing a book about the case. The Eagle was publishing more and more stories. The killer apparently wanted to set the record straight about who he really was and why he did it, and so he started writing letters to the media again and also began communicating with police. He sent 11 letters and packages, and in one of those cases, police were able to trace a letter to a specific drop box. They caught a blurry figure on a surveillance camera. It wasn't useful, but the image of a black Jeep in the background certainly was. Slowly, surely, the trap was closing. But the kicker is this. In one message, the killer asked police a question. If he sent a computer disk with more information, could they trace it to him? He didn't Google this or talk to computer pros or seek out his own evidence. He asked the cops. They said, no, golly, of course not. It would be totally anonymous. There's no way we could trace it to you. And he believed them. So he sent his computer disk. It was a simple test disk with little information, but still, to forensic data analysts, it was a gold mine. He might as well have sent in his address. After searching through the metadata of the disk, because of course the cops could trace it, police found that the last person to tinker with the disk was a guy named Dennis at Christ Lutheran Church. With a little gumshoe detective work, police went to the church and discovered that yes, a man named Dennis had access to the computer. Dennis Rader was a leader there, a stand-up guy. They looked up Dennis Rader's house and information and saw he owned, wait for it, a black Jeep, the same kind of car they spotted on surveillance cameras. Police managed to get a sample of DNA from his daughter and use that to trace the suspect's genealogy back to Rader himself. Armed with a search warrant, they finally busted him in February 2005, done in by his own stupidity. I was thinking about this, the downfall of Rader and so many other violent idiots with narcissistic delusions of grandiosity while I floored it to the hospital that night. Because the same thing happened here in Ridgewood. A killer had terrorized the town and then simply disappeared. But unlike the BTK, the rest stop killer had never been caught. He made no slip-ups. He never contacted the press. He never taunted police. After Tommy and the two Bobbies, he simply moved on. For years afterwards, he hunted rest stop after rest stop, town after town, state after state, man after man. He had killed with impunity for years, decades. The buttons tell us this. There were scores of them, maybe hundreds. If the killer never actually talked, the buttons stood in for him, writing a story of tragedy and grief that stretches across the entire country. But then, one day, he died. I was sure of it. So, why the new murders then? If the rest stop killer had died, how did the killings continue? They were exactly the same, weren't they? Well, no. Yes, the new murders happened in Ridgewood, in the valley, with nearly the same style of assault. But remember, the subtle differences, the stab wounds, the different genders, that was a first. And the sheer violence and damage, that was different as well. Both Bee and Margie had survived their attacks. That was also a first. But what's more, and this is what led me to the Palmer headquarters. By dumping the victims at properties owned by the Palmers, instead of sticking to the valley, this new copycat killer was doing exactly what the BTK did. Sending a message. Communicating. The original rest stop killer never did this. But his copycat did. And the thing is, it almost worked. At that very moment, as I made my way to the hospital, the cops were arresting the wrong guy back at the Palmer headquarters. Were it not for that one simple hair floating through the dead air of the Palmer headquarters, this new copycat killer would have gotten away with it. Her plan almost worked. I was almost to the hospital now. This would be the night it all ended. The killer would not slip away again. I tried to call Winnie. She should be there now, with Bee. There was no answer. Of course. I gripped the wheel and throttled towards the parking lot. The ER door was surrounded by media vans, reporters, and security. How would I get in? Had Chief Williams called his cops on scene? I hope so. Maybe they would stop the killer. I cursed myself for not pausing long enough to fill him in instead of dashing out of the Palmer office. I slammed the car to a stop in the white zone and did the only thing I could think of. I bolted. I raced past the security and the press and dashed towards the stairwell, the same one I had used earlier to go check on Margie Miller just hours before. A security guard yelled out behind me, "I'm calling the cops." I shouted across my shoulder, "Great, tell them I'm in B. Macy's room." I bounded up the echoing concrete stairwell, arriving on the 4th floor within seconds. It was eerily quiet. No doctors, no nurses. There should have been a legion of doctors trying to keep B. Macy together. There should be cops on guard. Something was off. I saw Margie Miller's door. She would be inside right then, the machines and tubes making her body rise and fall with air, keeping her alive. Right next to it, there was another door. It said simply, Macy. This was it. B. Macy's room. I had put all the pieces together to lead me here, but honestly, I didn't know what to do. I had no weapon, No plan, no idea what was really waiting for me behind that door. I expected B, obviously, and Winnie, yes, but what if she was armed? It all happened so fast this whole night. I, too, had to recount my story to that independent city commission, and I told them this. It all felt like a blur. I wish I had my wits about me, but I was so intent on catching and stopping the killer in that room that it felt like I was in a fugue state almost of tunnel vision. So in that moment, standing outside B's door, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my phone, clicked open Instagram, and went live. I told the commission this. In that moment, it seemed entirely logical, like a solid plan. Whatever happened over the next several minutes would be broadcast live to millions of crime-adjacent listeners, hopefully securing a confession for all to hear. Nikki had streamed the confession of Father O'Reilly on our TikTok account, the stream that catapulted us to the top of the charts. It worked then, so why not? And if I died in the next few minutes, at least people would know how and why and who did it. Because if I was right, this copycat killer was right behind this door. I slid my phone back into my pocket, being sure to see it was still broadcasting. And then I reached for the handle. Inside, B. Macy was laid out on the bed. The same machines and tubes keeping Margie Miller alive also kept B alive as she rose and fell in rhythm to the pumping ventilators. I saw Len standing near the window, his hands gripping a chair as if he wanted to crush it. Len. Of course, Len. I should have known he'd be here. Nothing would keep him from B's side. And then, Winnie. She was standing next to Len, her eyes holding both fear and cunning at the same time. God, I liked Winnie. Even in that moment, I couldn't help but appreciate how, unlike me, she kept her wits about her. She tipped her chin to the far corner of the room, behind B's bed. I inched open the door even more and saw what Winnie was trying to alert me to. There she was, in the corner, holding a gun on Len and Winnie and now me. It was the copycat, Molly Miller. She motioned with her gun for me to close the door. There was a cop on the floor, knocked out cold. The door clicked shut behind me. Dead silence in the room. No one moved or spoke. I turned to Molly. I said, "Now what?" Molly squeezed the gun and looked to the big window just behind Len and Winnie. There was a good view of the parking lot and the town beyond. I noticed a twinkling of reds and blues sparkling up in the distance. There's no way Williams and Jones would make it in time, I thought. She would kill us, all of us. I was sure of it. We all formed a triangle of sorts. Winnie and Len near the window, me by the door, Molly at B's head, gun in hand. I turned my body sideways, years of Marine training kicking in from out of nowhere. Make yourself small. Don't be a target. I shifted my feet on the floor, scooching across the linoleum towards Molly. I needed to get closer. It was our only chance. Molly narrowed the gun on me. Stop moving. I held up my hands. I said, "What's the plan here, Molly?" Silence hung in the air. Molly would not be led around. Not now. Not at the end. Her eyes narrowed. She said, "How did you know?" I clocked the window again. Were the lights closer now? I had to keep stalling. I let it all out. "The dogs," I began. Grip and grin. I told her that those great big lovable morons left hair all over my clothes whenever I left the Miller house. I saw the hairs on Margie, even in the hospital. Even the most sterile of environments could not fully scrub stray burner hairs from the hospital bed. Molly looked down at her scrubs and smiled grimly. She pinched a stray hair from her shirt and let it drift down to the floor. I shifted my feet again, an inch closer now. This next part would be tricky. I didn't need to hear her confess. That she was the killer seemed apparent enough at this point. A gun, probably blood on her shoes. Knowing what I knew then in that room, I presumed police would be able to retrace her movements and place her in the same area as Gary, and then Margie, her own mother, and then B. I wasn't concerned about a confession. I figured everyone listening had put it all together by this point. No, now I was concerned about getting the full story before she killed us. On the way to the hospital, after seeing the dog hair in the Palmer office, I had worked out most of the details, I think. And I wanted to use them to my advantage here. It was the only thing I could think of to get Len and Winnie and me out of this mess. I tried to mimic what Nikki would do in the detective's room, to empathize with the killer, to make them believe you were on their side, that you understood completely. I smiled gently and said, "It was your father, wasn't it?" Molly cocked her head, sort of like one of her own dogs, honestly. "Your father, Bob Miller, he was the rest stop killer, wasn't he? That's how you got access to the buttons. You found them after he died." She hadn't shot me yet, so that was good. I shifted my feet another inch. Reds and blues outside the window. I could hear sirens now. They were closer. I had to keep stalling. I hoped my phone was recording all this. I inched even closer, slowly, my toes pulling me across the tile. I continued. Bob Miller, city councilman, advocate for the valley. No one ever suspected him. Ever. He had a good job, took him all over the country, trying to sell communities on coaxial cable and then rural broadband. He had access, time, good looks, a nice car, the gift of gab. I could picture all of these towns, all of these rest stops, all of these men. A stranger comes to town for a few weeks, works with city officials, a real stand-up guy, friendly, charming, a real man's man. No one ever suspected him. Not the man in the city council chambers, charming the locals, bringing them the internet. Molly lowered the gun a fraction. I scooched forward. Lights brighter outside now, sirens louder. The cops had arrived. Winnie spoke up, as if breaking a trance. But why Molly? Why Gary and Bea and Margie? Molly snorted. She said, "They knew. All of them. They knew my dad was a killer, and they covered it up." She raised the gun again, and rage came into her eyes. The gun shook in her hands as she waved it around the room. They knew, and they let him get away with it, and they all had to die. All of them. The city commission didn't need to subpoena the recording. All of this was going live, broadcast to millions. It's on YouTube, so they included the transcript in the report. What follows is pretty much verbatim of what Molly told us in that room.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350-plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
She said after her father died in September, she was finally able to go into his office. It was his private space, never to be violated by anyone. There were strict rules about this. In fact, the entire family practically lived by Bob's rules. But they had to clean it out. Margie was intent on leaving, and neither of them, Margie or Molly, had really explored this space before. They discovered his box hidden in a secret compartment behind his bookshelf. Most of the office was just books and work and framed photos of his family, nothing special. But this box, it looked special. Molly opened it and saw the buttons. It was all so confusing, she said. There were just so many, too many to count. They had threads on them and bits of blood and stray bits of jeans. There was an old pair of sewing shears, and honestly, She didn't know what to make of it. Why buttons? Why hide them? She had never known him to sew or collect things outside of spoons and dishes and German Stein collections in their living room, which, honestly, seemed like a lot of collecting to me. In no way do I want to sympathize or empathize with Bob Miller, a literal killer, or his daughter, Molly, also a literal killer. But I thought this next part was important. In fact, it reminded me of BTK again. Carrie Rawson, a best-selling author and victims advocate who has spent years helping others connect the dots about the real identities of serial killers, said sometimes they are not the horrible monsters made out in media narratives and true crime shows, at least not towards their family, not always. They can sometimes be kind, caring family men. And yes, they can be kind and then violent or abusive towards their spouses at the same time. They can look like ordinary family men to some of the time, while also having weird, strict rules and bouts of controlling, abusive behavior. Slippage maybe only family would notice, or not. And she would know. Her father was BTK Dennis Rader. This sounded exactly like what Molly Miller was saying about her father, Bob. He was a beloved family man, a city council member in Ridgewood. People liked him, voted for him for years. In retrospect, yes, people said he was a stickler for rules, sometimes trying to get employees fired or residents fined for breaking the silliest, most obscure rules in city codes. But for the most part, Molly said he was okay. A good father, maybe a little odd and rough around the edges, but okay. I couldn't interview Margie at that point, but I imagine she would have had a different story, a story of hidden abuse and control. It's probably, in retrospect, why she wanted to get away from Ridgewood so fast, to just put everything behind her and finally, at long last, escape. I asked Molly, why not just go to the cops? Tell them what you found. Molly shook her head. She looked down at the bed, at B. There was nothing but contempt on her face. It was obvious. Molly waved her gun at B. She said, because of them, because my mom, and because of B and Gary. Molly said that besides the buttons, she had discovered news clippings of the rest stop killer in the box. They also discovered a driver's license or two of men, one from Nebraska, one from Florida, a few news clippings from the Ridgewood Recorder about Tommy and the two Bobbies, but then also news clippings about mysterious murders all across the country. Men found in valleys, men who went to rest stops or public parks looking simply to hook up with each other, only to be found, the next morning, their bodies stomped into the earth. Men forgotten or overlooked or even ridiculed in their own communities. Molly went to her mother, who said B and Gary were coming over, right then, to talk about it. Apparently, this is according to Molly anyway. Her mother had discovered the box of buttons and clippings earlier, before Molly did. Margie went to her best friend, B, who called Gary. They told Margie not to call the cops. They told her to wait. They said if news of this broke, if Bob was revealed to be the rest stop killer, the mayor would quickly appoint a replacement for Bob, and suddenly B and Gary would be on the outs on the city council. The Palmer development would be approved, and all of their hard work, all of Bob's, would be for nothing. And so, well, they convinced Margie. She had to keep it all a secret. She would agree to join the council temporarily, remember, the widow's mandate, and she would vote with B and Gary against the Palmer development when it came up for a vote. And then she could retire. The Palmer deal would be dead for good, and she could move on. Molly was practically shaking with rage at this point as she told us the story. She said, they actually tried to convince me that it was for the greater good. I had just learned that these monsters knew about my dad and wanted to cover it all up for a stupid housing vote. I almost couldn't believe it. it was just achingly ironic. Molly was trying to blame the very people she murdered for their own murder, while also taking on the very mantle of what they said to her, the public good. In short, she said her mom, Bea, and Gary all pushed her to just overlook the buttons, for now, for the public good. And her response? To kill them, all of them, for the public good. After all, they were the monsters who covered up for Bob Miller, the rest stop killer. They knew, and they had to be silenced. They had to pay. I knew at this point that I was talking to a full-fledged narcissist, someone who could rationalize murder like this, make herself out to be the hero in this story, because she had been wronged and what she was doing was righteous. I've seen this before. But still, why didn't she just go to the cops, ignore her mother and Gary and Bea, and go to Chief Williams and tell him the whole thing? It was, suddenly, like a light switch had been thrown somewhere deep inside. She could pin the whole thing on the Palmers. She could frame Daniel Palmer and enact her revenge on the entire Palmer family by inserting herself into their house and planting the buttons. Then she would kill off the only people who knew the truth: her mom, Gary, Bea, and of course, people would believe it. Her own father wouldn't be the notorious serial killer. That shame wouldn't follow her around, no. No one would ever know Bob Miller was involved at all. It would be Daniel Palmer, suspect from the beginning, the man with access and motive, like, gee, isn't it convenient that the opponents of his housing deal are all dead now? This might seem outlandish, like a wild Hollywood plot, but remember, it worked. The chief had literally just arrested Daniel Palmer for the murders that very night. But then, grip and grin, the dog hair gave it all away. It wasn't the dog that didn't bark, it was the great big lovable morons who couldn't stop shedding. As caregiver to Daniel Palmer Sr., Molly suddenly had access to their house, to the office, everywhere. She took the buttons, planted them in secret places, and then enacted her plan. Point everything towards the Palmers until police found the buttons. In the Instagram live broadcast, she didn't out and out say all of these parts. She stuck to rationalizing the murders instead, saying her mother and Bea and Gary had to die, and that the Palmer family had to suffer. They had abused her, both physically and psychically, and they deserved it. They all did. The whole town was rotten, and she couldn't wait to get away. I need to pause here. Like I said, I was broadcasting the whole time. This whole sordid story was being broadcast live on Instagram as Molly revealed herself to be the real killer. And like I said, I told the city commission everything that happened that night, how I put the pieces together and figured out that it was Molly Miller behind this new spate of murders because the dog hairs had intermingled with the buttons. But I also told this to the commission. I need to go verbatim here from the final report because, as I told them, something happened. While we were in the hospital room with Molly aiming her gun at Len and Winnie and me, I had inched myself close enough to strike, little by little. I was so close. And then the recording stopped. I told the commission that as Molly raged and gesticulated and tried to make it seem perfectly reasonable to kill her own mother, that Molly was the real victim here, I struck. I was a Marine, remember? If I was sort of at a loss for what to do earlier, I knew our only chance of getting out of that room was to get the gun away from Molly. And somehow, in that ensuing scuffle, the phone must have turned off. The live broadcast stopped. So that's why I'm relying on the commission report and what I said to them. In fact, they also interviewed Winnie, who who also wrote stories about what happened for the Ridgewood Recorder and is actually planning a book that is coming out next year. I'll have her on this very podcast to talk about it. Here's what we said. When I reached for Molly, I managed to grab the gun, but it skittered away on the floor during a brief fight. In the ensuing chaos, Winnie made a break for the door. So did I. The cops were racing up the stairwell at this point, making their way to B's room, when both Winnie and I practically leapt out into the hallway. We had escaped. At least, we thought so. We thought Len was right behind us. Of course we did. He saw the scuffle and saw the gun skitter away, and we just thought, well, he'd make a break for it too. That's when we heard it. The screaming, the guttural, riotous, raging screaming. Winnie and I were in the hallway at this point. The cops were not with us yet. They were racing up the stairwell still. We could hear them. They were so close. But both Winnie and I realized we were alone in the hallway. Molly was still inside the room, but so was Len. Len Macy remained in the room. Len Macy, the man who followed B. Johnson to Ridgewood, the man who married her at a moonlit ceremony, the man who played town Santa because she asked him to, the man who never left town after years of being considered a serial killer because B was there, the man who followed her around that week, trying to protect her, the man who was there that night when Molly sneaked up on him with her own lug wrench and knocked him out and kidnapped the love of his life and stomped her half to death. The man, we now realize, who had remained behind in the hospital room with the woman who just admitted to his face that she killed his summer bride. The man, both Winnie and I told the commission, who must have picked up the gun. The man who must have done what Adalberto Diaz did to Michael Palmer that very night. The man who must have done what Marianne Bachmeyer did to the guy who raped and murdered her daughter. Remember her? I told you this story was about justice, or maybe vengeance, or perhaps both. That's what happened that night, in that room. There was no time to act. Everything happened so fast. In the hallway, stunned and grateful to be out of harm's way, Winnie and I froze. The cops were almost there, pounding up the stairwell. And then, there it was, that scream. In the hospital room, Molly screamed from somewhere deep inside, "No!" And then there was a gunshot. And another. 2 quick staccato bursts. There was a slight pause. We heard someone inside, mumbling. Then another shot. Singular. And then finally, one more. Even from outside, in the hallway, we could hear an enormous clap, a meat-slapping collision of flesh on bone, as if someone had dropped a side of beef on the ground. Winnie and I looked at each other. We knew. That was Len. The last shot, we were sure of it. The cops finally made it. They burst into the hallway at that precise moment. Chief Williams raced to the room. He barked, "Is she in there?" Both Winnie and I shrugged. We told him what we told everyone, what we told police, what we told the commission, what I'm telling you right now. That there was a scuffle. That the recording must have stopped somehow. That the gun got away. That Winnie and I raced outside as fast as we could. But Len must have picked up the gun, and, well... Chief Williams raised an eyebrow, like he didn't believe us. He peeked into the room, his revolver ready to fire. Through the open door, we saw everything. Molly slumped in a pile of blood in the corner, 2 shots to her chest. B, in the bed, blood pooling around her pillow in her wispy hive of golden hair. And Len Macy, laying on top of her, slumped over the bed, his massive frame rising and falling with bees as the machines and tubes and ventilators pumped useless air into her body. It had all ended right there, in that room. We knew who the original rest stop killer was and who was committing the new murders. Most of it had been recorded. The whole world knew what happened that night. I need to pause again. I should probably address the conspiracy theories right now while I'm at it. I'm sure you've read all the theories online about this case. I'm sure you've read the Commission's report online by now. They asked me about these time discrepancies as well. There was one particular gap they were interested in. This case from the beginning has been about timelines and small slivers of opportunity when tragedy strikes. It's probably no surprise that happened here again at the end. The Commission lawyers asked how it was possible for the Instagram broadcast to stop at 11:34 p.m. when the scuffle apparently began, until 11:38 p.m. when the cops first appeared in the hallway at B's door. Didn't we say that everything happened so fast, within seconds, that there was a scuffle, the gun got away, we escaped, and that Len got the gun and shot Molly? Both Winnie and I made it sound like it happened in mere moments. So why 4 minutes? That's a long time. A lot could be said or done or agreed upon in that time. What happened in those 4 minutes between the scuffle and the gunshots? I need to repeat again exactly what I told the Commission. I don't know. Winnie said the same. I got close to Molly. I saw my time to act. There was a scuffle. The gun got away. It must have slid to Len, and he picked it up. Neither Winnie nor I saw a thing. We were in the hallway. We couldn't account for those 4 minutes. I had thought everything happened so fast, but maybe not. I don't know what happened in that room, what Len said to Molly, or why it took so long. Like I said, there was a scuffle. Len somehow got the gun. I was outside by that point. That's, legally, all I know. And that's how everything ended. That's why there was no charging document. The killer, Molly, had been murdered by the man who swore to protect B. Macy from way back in the summer of love. There was no one to charge. Bob Miller, the original rest stop killer, was dead. This case just ended. Right then. Chief Williams released Daniel Palmer that very night, with apologies, which were in the end accepted. Daniel Palmer still had a development deal to push through and a son to grieve. I have not followed up with the Palmers, to be honest. I'm not sure how things are going or what they're doing. They made it abundantly clear throughout this case that they did not want to talk, and I honored that. Chief Williams kept me around for a few days, demanding I make a full statement about what happened. I was happy to, especially since he no longer wanted to arrest me. He just wanted to know what happened and why, and to help fill in the gaps. I spoke to the Commission as well in great detail. Detective Jones spent the next several months, and is still doing this in fact, trying to track down the victims and to notify their families and to bring some sense of closure to people who have been waiting, probably for decades, to know what happened to their sons and husbands and brothers. There were nearly too many buttons to count. Too many men. As of this recording, Detective Jones has been able to match 56 victims to the rest stop killer and make positive identifications of men who, like Tommy Coulee and Bobby Calvin, sought out rest stops in public parks and wooded groves for the connection they couldn't find in their own communities, and wound up alone, stomped to death, and drowning in their final moments. I spoke to Jones later, in her office. I asked her how many more buttons there were, how many more men. She went quiet for a moment. A tear began to build in her eye, I thought. She said, simply, hundreds. As of this recording, she is still tracking down victims every day and making phone calls to their families. And speaking of phone calls, there was a very important call made that night. I've told you this before, But after the original murders, way back in the 90s, reporter Winnie Freeman made a pact with Detective Jones and Bob Coulee, Tommy's dad. They would keep the men in the news and hope for tips and hope for that one tiny thing, that small sliver of hair that would find the killer and finally provide answers. Winnie had promised Bob, as soon as she knew, he would know. She had been waiting to make this call since 1995, nearly 30 years. At the hospital that night, Winnie broke away. She told me she had a story to file, but most importantly, she had a phone call to make. I watched her make it to the stairwell. I watched her lift her phone to her ear. Winnie Freeman had made a promise decades ago, and she was making good on it. Of course she was. I talked to Bob Coulee later when I returned to town for the commission. He said he knew there was a break in the case. He watched the news. In fact, he listened to the Instagram broadcast that night and knew firsthand what had happened. That Bob Miller, a man he knew from around town, had met and chatted with numerous times and had voted for in each election, had killed his boy. Still, he was grateful for Winnie's call, for the full story. He said he'd stood in front of his mantel that whole night, admiring the framed photo of his beloved boy in his members-only jacket and Jordache jeans and his Mustang and his new auto shop, and he thought Tommy Coulee had so much love and promise and potential in this photo. It was Bob's favorite. He told me, if there's anything I'd ever want people to take away from this, it's not the killer or the copycat or the cover-ups or the decades of pain. He paused, shook his head. Jesus, I don't even know why I have to say this, but I do, just as much as I should have said it way back in the 90s, before Tommy. His words stuck in his throat for a moment. Then he said, it's still relevant today, is what I mean, as much as it was then. But love your children. No matter what. That's what I want to tell people. Like I said, I don't know why this even needs to be said, but love your children. I'll see you next week with a new season. Until then, this is Chase Patrick from San Francisco with a reminder. Stay tuned. You'll never unhear what happens next.